Hello, this is Coach Wilson, and this is Chapter 3, Section 3. Today we're going to be talking about an enduring document, continuing our chapter on the Constitution, as well as most of our study in the first part of this class will be on the Constitution. Now, one of the first things you need to note about the Constitution is that it is a living document, okay, and that means a flexible document. It means it's constantly changing. Much like a human being is born, it is a baby, it grows up, it learns to talk, it learns to walk, it learns to do math and read and write and play sports or play an instrument or whatever it may be, but it learns and it changes over time and becomes a different human being than what it was when it started. The same as the Constitution, it is a living document. It is going to change as it continues to exist in our country. Now, the point of it is to adapt and grow with the changing nation. If you think about our country 100 years ago, things are a lot different than they were in 1905 or 1920. Think about 1920, we just came out of a world war. The automobile is just becoming important. Electricity is just starting to really expand at that point. There's a lot of things now that we rely on that in 1920 the country didn't have to think about. So there's three ways that the Constitution continues to be a living document or change. The first one is through amendments. We have 27 of those. You remember the first 10 amendments were the Bill of Rights, and that is the amendments that were established after the Constitution was signed in order to convince the rest of the states who were kind of on the fence about it to agree to the Constitution originally. If you look to the right, I've also listed all 27 amendments. Now, those are abbreviated versions of the full amendments, but that gives you an idea of what each amendment does, something you may want to make sure you're familiar with. Now, you also have interpretation, and we call this the necessary and proper clause. Okay, and what this means is that Congress can stretch its powers to almost anything in the best interest of the citizens. All right, we call this the elasticity clause. An example, Congress can create military academies. All right, now there's nowhere that it specifically says that Congress can do that. However, it is an implied power. Okay, they use the necessary and proper clause whenever they feel like the country is in need of something. And there's various situations that this has happened. Like I said, you can look those up if you're really interested in understanding the elastic clause. But more importantly, what you do need to understand is that there are still things that protect your rights, and that's what the purpose of the amendments are. They first and foremost protect the country from the government. And then this necessary and proper clause protects Congress from not being able to do its job. So essentially, they are limited, but then they are allowed to read into the Constitution and the 27 amendments to do whatever they need to get done. Now, another way to change the Constitution is these traditions, okay? And these are customs, well, generally what we call these, and they're traditions that are part of the unwritten Constitution. For example, a president's cabinet. There's actually nowhere in the Constitution that says a president has to create a cabinet. However, since George Washington was president, we have had a cabinet. What that is a cabinet is a group of men or women who serve with the president, and they advise him on what he should and should not do or help him run the government. For example, in the picture below, you see George Washington. He has the Secretary of the Treasury, Alexander Hamilton. Alexander Hamilton was responsible for helping form the first financial plan for the country and trying to get us out of debt from the Revolutionary War. Secretary of War Henry Knox, who's responsible for any dealings with the military and if we were to go to war again. Secretary of State Thomas Jefferson. Secretary of States, especially in the early times, were very important, mainly because they were seen as stepping stones to the presidency. In Thomas Jefferson's case, Thomas Jefferson was overseas advocating for our rights and trying to negotiate the Treaty of Paris after the Revolutionary War. And then you have the Attorney General Edmund Randolph, who's responsible for defending the country in a court of law. So you've got a lot of various duties there that the president needs someone to help with, and that the president can't be responsible for all on his own or her own. Now, if you're noticing the little turkey there on the side, put that there because customs are something that we have in everyday life, all right? And that's something you need to understand. A custom is something that is observed as kind of like, it's not a law that you have to do it, but people do it every year anyways. Perfect example is Thanksgiving. And there's no place that says we have to observe Thanksgiving, but it's a custom. It's part of this country's custom. You go to other countries, they have various customs. But in terms of the government, that is one way that uh, the Constitution is changed that is not necessarily written in the Constitution. All right, there's two ways to propose amendments. All right, and we're going to kind of get into how you um, get these or through this process. First of all, an amendment is proposed by a vote of 2/3 of both the houses of Congress. That includes the Senate and the House of Representatives. Okay. An amendment can also be proposed by a national convention that is requested by 2/3 of the states. Now, these national conventions have to be requested, and it has to be at least, I think it's 34 states in order to convene, and then they have to vote that an amendment needs to be added. Very rarely does this happen. Most of the time, that is left to Congress. Now, once an amendment is proposed by a vote of 2/3 of both houses of Congress, and when we say proposed, it does have to be ratified. Okay, it does have to be passed, but this is the way that they amend the Constitution. Okay, it's proposed. Once it passes there, then it becomes a new amendment to the Constitution. But it does have to pass through both houses in order to be a new law. All right. Now, there are two ways to ratify amendments. Okay, if you want to ratify an amendment, first of all, you have to have 3/4 of a state legislature. Okay, so once an amendment has been proposed, okay, and we've amended the Constitution, then when it's ratified, and after an amendment is proposed, it must be ratified, and this is done by the state legislatures. Okay, by 3/4 of the state legislature, it can be ratified, or if you have the state conventions formed, it can be ratified by 3/4 of the state convention. Okay. All right. We're going to leave it there. Hopefully that was simple enough for you, trying to keep it simplified. And just to make sure, I want to be clear, okay, 2/3 of the vote in Congress to propose the amendment, okay, and then the ratification process through the state legislatures, okay, which requires 75% or 3/4 rather than 2/3. All right. Anything, please let me know. If not, I will talk to you soon.